You ever catch yourself sizing up someone else's new car, maybe?
Or feeling that little twinge when you see, say, a friend's promotion announcement online.
Right. That's social comparison right there in action. It's this constant, often silent way we sort of stack ourselves up against other people.
Yeah, it's woven into practically everything we do, often without us even realizing it. It really is fundamental.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today for you, the learner. We've been digging through a stack of sources, actually, including this report called Social Comparison in the Age of AI.
Yeah, trying to get to the heart of this really core human tendency.
We want to explore, why we do this in the first place, going way back, evolutionary roots even, and then bring it right up to today, how AI is changing things.
Right. Our mission here is really to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge about social comparison, understand the mechanics behind it, the impact it has on us, on society.
And yeah, how it's evolving with the whole digital world and AI, because you've likely felt that pang of envy scrolling social media. Or maybe that quiet little boost comparing your own progress. Today, we're getting under the hood, seeing why it happens and what it all means.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. This idea that social comparison is just everywhere.
Ubiquitous, yeah.
Absolutely. And the bedrock here is Leon Festinger's social comparison theory. This was way back in 1954.
54, wow.
Yeah, and his key insight was this. We humans, we have this innate drive, this need to evaluate our own opinions and abilities.
Okay.
And when we don't have clear objective standards, like, a ruler to measure height, we instinctively turn to other people. They become our benchmark.
So it's not just knowing if you baked a good cake, but how it compares to your neighbor's Instagram perfect version.
Exactly. But it goes deeper than just figuring things out intellectually.
How so?
Well, this drive isn't just some detached mental checklist. It's tied into really fundamental human needs, our need to belong, our desire to feel competent, and just our basic instinct to reduce uncertainty in the world. Think about it evolutionarily.
Right. Survival stuff.
Yeah. Knowing where you stood in the group, that was critical. For getting resources, even finding a mate, that feeling of wanting to improve or the unease of feeling like you're falling behind, it has these really deep primal roots.
That drive to move away from lack, I guess, towards security, well-being.
Precisely. That pain of deprivation versus becoming, healthy, as the sources put it.
So, okay, what are the actual mechanics? How do we do this comparing?
Right. So a couple of key things. First is target selection. Who do we actually compare ourselves to?
Okay.
We tend to look at people similar to us. That's lateral comparison. People we see as, better off upward comparison. And people we think are maybe not doing as well, downward comparison.
And is it random who we pick?
Not usually, no. It's often quite strategic, actually. Depends on our goal. Are we trying to feel better, learn something, just figure out where we fit?
Interesting. And what do we compare? Is it just achievements?
Oh, it's incredibly broad. Sure, abilities, achievements, material things like cars and houses.
Yeah.
But also opinions, beliefs.
Yeah.
Even how we're feeling emotionally. It's a really wide range.
Okay, so we pick something to compare. But what's the underlying reason? The motivation?
Good question. Several key motivations drive this. The first one, like Festinger said, is self-evaluation. Just getting an accurate read on ourselves.
Right. Am I any good at this?
Exactly. And we do that more when we're feeling uncertain. Then there's self-enhancement.
Wanting to feel good.
Pretty much. That's where downward comparison often comes in, comparing to those less fortunate. Or even just, interpreting a comparison in a way that makes us look good.
A little bit of bias there.
Can be, yeah. Self-improvement is another huge one.
Yeah.
We look up to people who are better than us. Upward comparison again. But hopefully with the idea that we can learn from them, get better ourselves.
As long as it feels attainable, I suppose.
That's key, yes. And finally, there's social connection. Belonging. Comparing helps us figure out the social norms, how to fit in. It's vital for group life.
These seem fairly conscious choices, some of them, but you mentioned earlier this digital world aspect makes it more subtle.
That's a really critical point now. Yes. While sometimes we consciously choose a role model, a lot of this comparison happens unconsciously. It's triggered by our environment.
And that environment is curated.
Increasingly, yes, especially online. Think about your social media feed. It's not random. AI algorithms are deciding what you see.
Right. To keep you engaged.
Exactly. And that often means showing content that triggers comparisons, perfect vacations, amazing careers, flawless looks. This can subtly push us towards upward comparisons, maybe making us feel inadequate or envious, even if we weren't looking for that.
So the AI is kind of directing our comparisons without us realizing.
In many ways, yes. It has this significant, often invisible power to steer our unconscious social comparisons. And that raises some big questions about, well, our autonomy in this digital age.
Yeah, that is a bit unsettling. Does this affect everyone the same way? Or does it vary?
Well, the fundamental drive to compare seems to be universal. It cuts across all demographics.
So kids on the playground.
Yep, comparing toys or who can run fastest. Teenagers. Huge comparison pressure around identity, fitting in.
Ugh.
Adults compare careers, family life, houses.
Even older adults.
Absolutely. Reflecting on their lives, comparing to peers, maybe even to their younger selves. Now, the specific things we compare might differ.
House.
Culture plays a role. Gender norms might influence focus, say, appearance versus agency. Socioeconomic status obviously affects what resources or attributes are relevant for comparison. But that underlying psychological engine, it seems to be running in all of us.
What about those cultural differences? You mentioned culture. How does that shape things?
It shapes it significantly. While the tendency is universal, how it's expressed, what gets prioritized, and the social consequences. That's very cultural. So in more individualistic cultures, like the US or Western Europe, the focus is often on standing out, on individual achievement. Comparisons might highlight uniqueness.
Right, being the best.
Whereas in more collectivistic cultures, say in parts of Asia or Latin America, the emphasis is more on group harmony, interdependence. Comparisons there might focus more on contributing to the group, maintaining relationships.
And the emotions are different too.
The interpretation and expression can be, yes. Pride after success might be openly celebrated in one culture, but seen as boastful or disruptive in another that values humility. So culture is like this lens, it shapes how we experience this universal thing.
It's really striking how deep this goes. You said it's not just a modern social media thing, it's historical.
Oh, absolutely. Long before psychology named it, people were grappling with it.
Yeah.
Look at ancient philosophy, Aristotle talking about honor, the Stoics warning against envy.
Religious texts too.
Definitely. Commandments against coveting your neighbor's goods. That's pure social comparison anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
Myths, legends, art, across cultures, they're filled with themes of rivalry, status, ambition, keeping up.
So the fact it pops up everywhere throughout history.
It strongly suggests this isn't just some modern fad. It points to a deep, maybe evolutionarily conserved need related to living in groups. Figuring out resource allocation, mate selection, learning skills, maintaining social order. It's a fundamental social navigation tool.
Okay, that brings us nicely to the why, the origins. Why did evolution favor this tendency to compare?
Well, from an evolutionary standpoint, having that ability, that inclination to compare, likely gave our ancestors a real edge, survival and reproduction.
How exactly? What was the advantage?
Think about basic survival.
Mm-hmm.
Assessing your strength relative to a competitor for food or shelter, pretty useful. Knowing if you should fight or back down.
Okay, makes sense.
And reproduction. Evaluating potential mates, their health, status, resources, and also assessing your own mate value compared to rivals. Crucial for passing on your genes. Even cooperating effectively in a group relies on knowing who's good at what, who to learn from, understanding the hierarchy, all involve some form of comparison.
So that connects back to what you said earlier about avoiding pain, seeking well-being. Comparison helped drive that.
Precisely. Feeling like you're falling short, lacking resources, that's uncomfortable. It motivates you to look at those doing better, figure out how they do it, and try to improve your own situation. Striving for that wealthy, healthy state, as the source material puts it, aligns perfectly with evolutionary goals.
Is there a biological basis for this, like in our brains?
There certainly seems to be. It's complex, of course, not one single gene for comparison, but genetics likely play a role in traits that influence it. Things like sensitivity to social rank, competitiveness, empathy, maybe even neuroticism.
Yeah, brain activity.
Yeah, specific brain regions get involved when we compare. The medial prefrontal cortex is active when we think about ourselves relative to others. Dopamine pathways, our reward system, light up with positive social feedback or status gains. Serotonin levels, the amygdala, which processes emotions like threat, They're all part of the neurobiological picture. What's fascinating and maybe problematic
Yeah.
is that these systems evolved in small groups, dealing with tangible status, who gets the best food, who leads the hunt. Now they're being constantly triggered by abstract digital things.
Likes, followers, curated images.
Exactly. Things that often have zero bearing on our actual physical survival. And that mismatch, that constant hijacking of ancient brain circuits by modern digital stimuli, that's likely a big contributor to the anxiety and compulsive behaviors we see today.
Wow. So back in those early human groups, what would comparison have looked like? What were they comparing?
Probably very practical things. Survival skills, mostly. Who's the best hunter? Who knows where to find water or edible plants? Who's skilled at making tools? Who's a reliable ally?
So learning by observing and comparing.
Absolutely. Observing successful individuals was key for learning. And those comparisons would have heavily influenced social standing, influence, maybe even leadership within the group.
And as societies got more complex farming, cities, states, how did comparison change?
It evolved right alongside society. In ancient civilizations, you see philosophers and religious leaders grappling with the outcomes: envy, pride, honor. Feudalism had its own comparisons based on birth, land.
Limited comparison between classes, maybe.
More limited between strata, yes. Then came capitalism. Boom. Suddenly comparison explodes across many more domains, especially economic success, individual achievement.
The Enlightenment, too, focusing on the individual.
That likely amplified it, yes. Focus shifted to individual talents, rights, accomplishments. And think about belief systems, religions, ideologies. Many have comparative frameworks built in. Chosen people, paths to salvation, us versus them.
So they use comparison, but maybe also try to manage it.
Often both. They define what's desirable to compare against, but also sometimes offer ways to cope with the burden, like emphasizing inner worth or detachment. The key thing is, these big societal shifts, agricultural, industrial, information revolutions, they didn't eliminate comparison. They just redirected it, changed the targets, changed what was valued.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about the impact. We know it's pervasive, but what does it actually do to us?
Right. The impact is really multidimensional. It affects us as individuals, our thoughts, feelings, actions, but it also shapes our relationships and the very structure of society.
Let's start with the individual impact then, cognitively, emotionally.
Okay. Cognitively, it heavily influences how we see ourselves, our self-concept, self-esteem. It affects how we explain our successes and failures. Did I succeed because I worked hard or just because someone else did worse? It can even sway our decisions. Feeling inadequate might make you avoid risks, while feeling superior might encourage risk-taking. Emotionally, it's a roller coaster.
Yeah, we touched on envy.
Envy, jealousy, shame, guilt, anxiety, depression, especially from those relentless upward comparisons, often fueled by idealized social media portrayals. Research clearly links a high tendency to compare with poorer well-being.
But it's not all bad, emotionally.
No, definitely not. Upward comparison can spark motivation, hope, inspiration, if the target feels relatable and achievable. Downward comparison can bring gratitude, contentment. It can even foster empathy sometimes.
And behaviorally, how does it make us act?
Oh, it drives a lot of behavior. The desire to achieve, obviously. Conforming to group norms. Competing with others. Sometimes, unfortunately, aggression or putting others down.
Trying to make ourselves look better by making others look worse.
Exactly. But also pro-social behavior, helping others, might come from comparison too. And consumption, keeping up with the Joneses, is classic comparison-driven behavior.
So overall well-being takes a hit, potentially.
The cumulative effect, especially in the digital age, with its constant, often unrealistic comparisons, can definitely impact life satisfaction, happiness, stress levels, and overall mental health. The dark side we hear a lot about.
But you said the interpretation matters hugely.
Absolutely crucial. It's not just the comparison itself, but how we appraise it.
Right.
Do we see the other person's success as attainable? Do we feel we have any control? That interpretation determines whether it's crushing or motivating.
So if you constantly base your self-worth on how you stack up.
That creates what psychologists call conditional self-esteem. Your self-worth is fragile, always dependent on the next comparison. It's like being on a psychological treadmill, exhausting, and makes you vulnerable to anxiety and depression.
Okay, so that's the individual. What about between people?
Yeah.
And in society?
Interpersonally, it's everywhere. Friendships have that mix of support and potential rivalry. Romantic relationships, comparisons to past partners, other couples can cause dissatisfaction or jealousy.
Sibling rivalry.
Classic example within families. And then zoom out to groups. Social identity theory talks about how we favor our own group, that's based on comparing our group positively to others.
In-groups versus out-groups.
Right. It drives conformity within the group, cooperation against other groups, and obviously competition. Look at social hierarchies. Status, power, dominance. They're built and maintained through comparison. Equity theory in organizations, comparing inputs and outcomes. It's fundamental.
So it helps hold society together, but also drives conflict.
It does both. Shared norms come from comparison, promoting integration. But status competition and outgroup derogation fuel conflict. And societies that push really narrow definitions of success, they can create these comparison traps.
Where lots of people feel like they're failing.
Exactly. Leading to widespread inadequacy, maybe even social unrest.
It's interesting how the sources mention its influence even in fields like philosophy or science. That seems less obvious.
It might seem less direct, but think about it. Philosophy thrives on comparing different arguments, different schools of thought, finding flaws, building better systems. That's comparative.
And science?
Science is inherently comparative. Comparing theories against evidence, comparing new findings to old ones. Peer review is a comparison process. Replication checks findings against each other. Trying to surpass previous understanding, that's the engine of progress, and it's fueled by comparison.
Even math and logic.
Comparing the elegance of proofs, the properties of logical systems, consistency, completeness. Identifying logical fallacies involves comparing flawed reasoning to valid principles. It even shapes our basic state of mind, our beliefs.
You could almost say the drive for knowledge itself is a kind of comparison.
That's a fascinating idea from the sources, yes. Comparing our current understanding against some ideal of complete knowledge. It fuels curiosity, discovery.
There's also this idea of comparison being an existential weight. What does that mean?
It means it's tied into these really deep human concerns. Who am I? That's often answered relationally in comparison to others. What's my purpose? We might compare our contributions. Even mortality. How will our legacy compare?
So it feels necessary, almost unavoidable.
It feels necessary because it evolves as a tool to navigate social complexity, especially when clear, objective measures are missing. Some theories, like terror management theory, even suggest that favorable comparisons help us manage existential anxiety by giving us a sense of significance, symbolic immortality.
Which is why just telling people stop comparing doesn't work.
Exactly. It's too deeply rooted. The more constructive path is awareness, noticing when and how you compare, consciously choosing comparisons, and building self-worth from the inside out based on values, not just external benchmarks.
Which brings us to that core question. Is it good or bad? Helpful or harmful?
It's profoundly both.
Yeah.
A true double-edged sword.
Okay, lay out the constructive side first.
Motivation, goal setting, learning new skills, self-improvement. Downward comparison can genuinely foster gratitude, satisfaction. It helps with social bonding, adhering to norms which help society function. Even societal improvement, learning from other societies' successes.
And the destructive side?
Envy, jealousy, resentment, even malice. Low self-esteem, anxiety, depression. Unhealthy, cutthroat competition. Aggression, bullying, pressure to conform that kills individuality. Materialism, constant dissatisfaction, distorted self-views.
So what determines which way it tips?
It's a complex interaction. The context matters hugely. Your own mindset growth versus fixed. Your personality, self-esteem levels, neuroticism, who you compare to on what dimension.
Yeah.
And external factors like perceived fairness, resource availability, cultural messages. It's really an interactionist perspective.
Can we talk about who benefits and who doesn't?
Generally, those who potentially benefit, or at least navigate it better, tend to be people with higher self-esteem, more resilience, maybe that growth mindset.
People are already doing okay.
Often, yes. Also, sometimes those in power can use comparison to maintain their position, and society can benefit from the innovation driven by healthy competition. Ethically, though, that gets complicated if the competition isn't fair.
And who's disadvantaged?
People with lower self-esteem, a fixed mindset, maybe higher neuroticism, or just a strong general tendency to compare, they're more vulnerable to the downsides. Anyone consistently on the losing end, due to systemic issues or imposter syndrome, targets of malicious comparison, obviously. And society suffers from excessive conformity or widespread mental health issues fueled by comparison.
It sounds like the benefits often go to the already advantaged.
That's a real concern, yeah. The Matthew effect, the rich get richer. It can perpetuate inequalities. And we have to remember, even the idea of benefit is subjective, culturally shaped. Is relentless progress always better than community harmony?
This really underscores the ethical side.
Absolutely. Fairness is a huge one. Is it fair to compare people with vastly different starting points? Justice comes into play. How do we distribute resources based on comparisons? Merit, need, equality. Even punishment, public shaming uses social comparison.
What about responsibility?
Big question. How much is on the individual to manage their thoughts? How much responsibility lies with society, institutions, tech companies designing these comparison-rich environments? What are the ethics of nudging behavior using comparison?
It gets thorny when rewards are based on comparisons that might be superficial or manipulated.
Exactly. It can reinforce systemic biases. Ethical judgment really needs to look at the intent, the context, the consequences, and the power dynamics involved. There's no simple thumbs up or thumbs down on social comparison itself.
The report raised an interesting point about cruelty. Why don't harmful people seem to use pro-social comparison, like comparing themselves to kind people?
That's a deep question. Often, extreme cruelty involves factors like psychopathy, where empathy is severely diminished. Or the perpetrators dehumanize their victims. They stop seeing them as relevant others for comparison in a moral sense.
So the comparison mechanism isn't broken, but twisted.
Kind of. Their comparisons might shift to deviant standards, comparing themselves to other aggressors, or comparing the victim's weakness to their own perceived strength. The target, the dimension, the values, they all get reconfigured along antisocial lines. The victim is essentially excluded from the sphere of moral concern.
So the breakdown isn't the comparison itself, but the moral compass and empathy.
Precisely. The comparison engine is amoral. Its ethical outcome depends on the content, context, empathy, and who counts as a relevant other. Interventions need to address those deeper distortions.
Okay, this feels like the perfect pivot point. Artificial intelligence. How is AI changing this whole game?
AI is impacting social comparison in, well, really profound ways, both in how we study it and how we experience it.
How does it help us study it?
We can use AI tools like agent-based modeling to simulate social comparison in artificial societies, see what patterns emerge. Reinforcement learning lets AI agents figure out comparative strategies. Network analysis uses AI to map social connections, find comparison clusters in real data.
Processing huge data sets.
Exactly. Observing real-world comparison at a scale never possible before analyzing language for sentiment, identifying topics people compare on. AI itself even uses comparison, like in generative adversarial networks, where AIs compete to improve.
But with that power comes responsibility.
Huge ethical responsibility.
Yeah.
This ability to predict and understand comparison patterns has to be used for good, not exploitation, avoiding manipulative ads, or messages designed to divide people by triggering negative comparisons. Governance and ethical design are crucial.
So how is AI currently shaping our experience of comparison?
Primarily through the digital platforms we use constantly. Social media algorithms, as we discussed, often amplify comparison-laden content because it drives engagement.
More envy, more outrage, more clicks.
Pretty much. Leading to intensified upward comparisons, FOMO, body image issues, reinforcing those in-group, out-group biases. Recommendation systems subtly nudge our desires by showing what people like you buy or value.
Gamification, too. Leaderboards.
Classic example.
Yeah.
Explicitly leveraging comparison for motivation. Can be good, but also risks unhealthy competition, burnout, and AI in marketing. Personalized ads, constantly invoking comparison, aspirational lifestyles, fear of missing out.
So AI creates these tailored comparison environments.
Bespoke comparison ecologies, yeah, where the online average you see might be wildly different from the real-world average, leading to biased self-assessment. And you get these feedback loops.
You see comparison content, you engage, AI shows you more.
Exactly. Potentially intensifying comparison, distorting reality, maybe even contributing to polarized information bubbles.
That sounds mostly negative. Does AI offer any hope for improving things?
It definitely have that potential. The sources highlight several possibilities for positive change.
Such as?
Well, AI tools could help increase self-awareness. Imagine an app tracking your digital behavior related to comparison, giving personalized insights into your triggers, maybe identifying cognitive distortions.
Like a personal comparison coach.
Sort of. AI could also help mitigate the negative effects directly. Algorithms designed to filter harmful content or provide reality checks on digitally altered images. Maybe diversifying feeds to show more realistic portrayals.
Mental health support.
Yes, AI-powered mental health apps offering coping strategies, mindfulness, self-compassion techniques, specifically targeting comparison distress.
Fostering healthier comparisons.
Potentially. Platforms could encourage learning-focused comparison, not just status. AI could match mentors, maybe expose us to diverse perspectives to reduce prejudice, promote content showing collaboration over just individual success.
But we need realistic expectations. AI won't make us happy all the time.
No, the goal isn't constant positive feelings. It's reducing the distress caused by destructive comparison, building resilience. Think of AI as a potential cognitive prosthesis or an awareness tool empowering us.
But that requires a different approach from tech companies.
Absolutely. A shift in design philosophy away from just maximizing engagement towards prioritizing human flourishing, developing new metrics for well-being, maybe even different business models.
There was also that interesting point about AI and our intuition regarding social comparison.
Right. Humans seem hardwired with a propensity to compare, shaped by evolution. But the specific skills are learned. That initial urge can feel very intuitive, almost automatic System 1 thinking.
And AI messes with that.
It can. Recommendations might bypass our usual intuitive filters. Algorithms shape what feels intuitively right or normal online.
So AI could help or hinder our social intuition.
Both are possible. Future AI might help us spot biases in our social gut feelings, maybe even train our intuition in safe, simulated environments. But there's a risk, too.
Becoming too reliant on AI, letting our own judgment atrophy.
Exactly. The ideal might be AI as a second opinion. Prompting more reflective, System 2 thinking about our initial intuitive social judgments.
So the challenge is designing AI to complement, not replace.
Precisely. To foster a kind of AI-augmented wisdom in navigating the social world, enhancing our judgment without undermining it.
Okay, so pulling this together, how do we navigate all this towards a more conscious existence with social comparison?
It really involves understanding that complex interplay between our circumstances, our individual differences, and our own agency.
Can you break that down?
Sure. Circumstances matter. Socioeconomic status, cultural background, major life events shape what and how we compare. Individual differences, personality traits like neuroticism or extroversion, our mindset, growth versus fixed, self-esteem levels, they all influence our reactions.
And agency, our ability to choose.
Yes, we have a capacity to some extent to choose our comparison targets, to reframe the meaning of comparisons, to seek out diverse information, to focus on intrinsic goals rather than just external validation.
Even our intuition is shaped by circumstance, right?
Absolutely. Our circumstances of intuition, the experiences that shape our gut feelings, differ hugely. And these circumstances provide the cognitive tools we use to process comparisons, creating feedback loops with our intuitive style. Exercising agency itself is influenced by circumstances and individual traits. Real empowerment needs to address systemic inequalities, too.
So going beyond just managing comparison, what about cultivating value from within?
That's key. Recognizing the limits of comparison, basing self-worth entirely on it, is a recipe for dissatisfaction. Instead, focusing on intrinsic motivation.
Doing things for the love of it.
Exactly. Self-determination theory points to autonomy, competence, relatedness as core needs. Also, self-acceptance and self-compassion, embracing flaws kindly without harsh judgment.
Knowing your values.
Clarifying personal values gives you an internal compass, less swayed by external comparisons. Mindfulness helps too, paying attention to the present without judgment, noticing comparative thoughts without getting swept away.
It connects to that idea of life is all there is. Focusing on the now.
Yes, and the existential point. When human dies, it needs no social comparison.
Yeah.
It puts things in perspective, helps reevaluate priorities away from constant striving based on others.
Can AI help with this inner journey?
It could potentially support it, guided meditations, journaling prompts, connecting supportive communities, but it can't replace the deeply human work of reflection, connection, and finding meaning.
What about education? Why aren't we taught how to handle social comparison?
It's complex, I suppose. Many adults aren't fully aware themselves or model unhealthy comparisons, but it's a huge missed opportunity.
What should be taught? Maybe as part of social-emotional learning?
Definitely. Key elements would be awareness, just recognizing comparison, the triggers, the emotions. Critical thinking and media literacy, dissecting those idealized images.
Growth mindset.
Crucial. Believing abilities can be developed. Empathy and compassion for self and others. Celebrating diversity, unique strengths. Focusing on contribution, collaboration, personal progress over just winning.
Differentiating inspiration from envy.
Yes. Knowing the difference between healthy admiration that motivates you and destructive envy that just makes you feel bad.
Yeah.
Not teaching this leaves kids vulnerable, like sending them online without media literacy skills, and it requires adults modeling it consistently.
The outline also mentioned physicality and freedom in relation to comparison. What's that about?
Physicality has a few layers. There are the tangible dimensions we compare: appearance, physical abilities, possessions,
Sure.
but also our biological embodiment, the actual physiological changes like stress hormones when we feel threatened by comparison. Chronic negative comparison is linked to poor physical health.
And environmental embodiment.
Yeah, physical spaces, signaling status, big houses, corner offices. So physicality isn't just observable traits, but our internal responses and the environmental cues too.
And freedom. Freedom from comparison.
Not freedom from it entirely because it's so ingrained. More like freedom from its destructive grip. Internal freedom through mindfulness, self-acceptance, intrinsic validation.
And freedom to choose.
Exactly. Freedom to choose comparisons wisely, self-comparison over time, inspiring role models, maybe downward comparison for gratitude without arrogance. And ultimately, freedom from societal constraints, pushing for more equitable structures, broader definitions of success. True freedom here is metacognitive awareness and intentionality, skillful navigation, not elimination.
This has been incredibly thorough. As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the trajectory? Where is social comparison heading?
Well, the current trajectory, without conscious intervention, it risks getting more intense, more negative. Digital tech, globalization, media saturation, they all amplify it. Potential consequences are worsening mental health, social fragmentation, hyperconsumerism.
But there's a potential positive path.
Yes, definitely. If we focus on increasing awareness, education, ethical AI design, maybe a cultural shift towards valuing intrinsic worth, cooperation, contribution, it really depends on the cumulative choices we all make: individuals, educators, policymakers, tech creators.
We have to decide whether to let it be exploited or harness it for good.
That's the crux of it. The ultimate direction might even depend on our collective consciousness evolving, recognizing our interconnectedness, maybe even reorienting comparison towards tackling shared global challenges could be incredibly powerful.
What about bigger picture? Does the universe compare itself, life itself?
Interesting question. The universe, as far as we know, doesn't engage in psychological social comparison. Physical systems might have comparative outcomes. Gravity wins, but there's no subjective awareness or emotion.
And life, evolution.
Natural selection absolutely has comparative outcomes. Fitness is relative. Conscious life probably involves rudimentary comparison. But human social comparison is unique, complex, self-aware, emotional, deeply cultural. We even compare ourselves to the universe when we search for habitable planets or ponder alien intelligence.
So we need to be careful not to anthropomorphize comparison onto evolution itself.
Exactly. Human psychological comparison is a specific, highly developed capacity.
So, synthesizing all this, AI's role, human agency, what's the final word?
AI has this dual potential amplifier of negatives, or supporter of positives. It's a tool. Its impact depends entirely on human choices, our ethics, policies, education, individual decisions.
So human awareness and wisdom remain key.
Paramount. AI can't substitute for that essential human work. We need human-centric AI development, prioritizing well-being and autonomy, AI and social comparison. It's really a major test case for responsible technology development.
Maybe AI's biggest benefit is just showing us ourselves more clearly.
That could be it. Acting as this sophisticated mirror, making these dynamics more visible, forcing us to confront them, understand them, and consciously take ownership of our own social and psychological evolution.
Some truly profound insights to finish on. So we've taken a really deep dive into the complex world of social comparison today. We've looked at its fundamental nature, those deep evolutionary roots.
Its intricate dance with technology now, especially AI, and its profound impact on our well-being, both individually and collectively.
And hopefully understanding these dynamics empowers you, our listener, the learner, to navigate this all with, well, greater self-awareness and a more critical eye.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which leads us to our final thought for you to mull over. As AI increasingly shapes our social landscapes, these environments where we compare, will we become more attuned, more aware of this inherent drive we have? Or will these often invisible algorithms just tangle us up even more in cycles of comparison we barely even recognize?
That really is the question.
The answer, it seems, might lie in our willingness to look inward just as much, maybe even more than we constantly look outward.
Well said.
So we really encourage you to reflect on your own habits around social comparison. Think about how the insights from this deep dive might play out in your own life.
We hope this exploration is giving you some valuable clarity and maybe a few surprising insights along the way.
This is DigitView.